Residents of Mbatoho, an island on the River Benue, near the state capital, throng the premises of the government house in Makodi. They have a complaint to lay before the governor.
The Fulanis came and they said we should vacate the area because the thieves don't want them to rear their cows in the country. So we should move out of the area, and the area is being secured for them so that they can stay and operate. Now we have moved out of that area.
While the Mbatoho Islanders' complaint is pretty straightforward, there are concerns about the ease with which the invaders displaced them, despite a subsisting law and security presence.
This is obvious. To prove that we have the power to send you out, they did not kill. They came and chased them out and conquered and took over the place. I mean, that's conquering as far as I'm concerned. Because they are in their home and you come chase them out and take your cows. They go in and feed on whatever is their produce. And you take over, pitch tents and you live there. What is that? Isn't that conquering?
These complaints are already known to members of the Benue State Security Council as they emerge from a meeting. Governor Tom conveys their decision to the people.
Mbatoho community attack and displacement by this mercenary herdsmen was featured, and it was discussed extensively, and we have taken steps. And I believe that within the week, the security agencies should swing into action and ensure that we chase away all the killer herdsmen and mercenaries that invaded your land.
The assurance from the governor will only make sense to displaced inhabitants of the island farming community if their ancestral home is secured and they can return to their livelihood.
We're joined now by Segun David, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Chromex Security Services. He's also been with the British Army. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
You know, listening to that report, several things come to mind, especially in the light of what has been happening about this. We have security agencies in the area, and this is not supposed to happen. But then they just come in there, and you heard the narrative there, and so it's, I mean, it's unthinkable to have this kind of things happen.
It's mind-boggling in the sense that we have a security system in Nigeria, but then they are not really functioning the way they should function. And I think that's the basics of all these things. If you look at what is happening, it's been happening for a long time. It's not just starting today. According to some statistics, for instance, in 2014, over 1,200 people died from these people, from these herdsmen. But then we need to look at the root causes. We need to look at who are they, where are they coming from, what do they want. Again, these are just cattle rearers moving from one town to another, moving from one village to another, trying to look for greener pastures. But in the course of all this, things have moved on. Issues were arising. Now, when issues arises, who deals with it? Which authority deals with it? You expect that the Nigerian police should deal with things like that. But unfortunately, they've not been able to handle it properly, and that is why we're having these problems. And if care is not taken, it will continue.
You know, but looking at the whole scenario, having spoken about this several times, do you think that it's fair commentary to say, look, this looks like a deliberate plan not to even respond to it adequately? Because some think that if the security agencies wanted to respond to something, we know how they will move.
Fine. I agree with you to some extent. But at the same time, we're all human beings. Personally, I think it's been politicized. That's one. Secondly, I think they've not been able to perform their duty properly due to some issues, especially the Nigerian police.
By default or design?
By design of themselves. It's not by default. There's a system in place. When you're a security agency, there's a process you need to follow. But if those processes are not being followed, then we need to ask questions. That's just it. We need to ask questions. If, for instance, the IG, for instance, is giving an inaccurate information, that it's been confirmed when this whole thing started, they said they are not Fulani herdsmen. But today, everybody knows. It's not a secret. It's open to the public. So for me, he has failed, you understand? And if he continues to handle this and he has not changed his mentality on how to handle this, we're still going to keep having the same problem.
Let me come in here because as troubling as this situation is, despite there's so many interventions that the government has put in place, like cat race now, within that region to try to see that security is controlled. We're having 26 people killed again, and then also before that, about 5,000 people sacked from 3 villages in Benue State. What do you think is the mindset of the aggressors now in this case? Have they been emboldened to a point where they feel that occupation is the next thing for them? Because if you can sack 5,000 people without killing a single one, what do you think of that situation?
It's a terrible situation. Personally, I still believe it is a failure of the government, it's the failure of the security agencies to deal with these issues appropriately. If all these issues have been dealt with appropriately, we won't be sitting here and talking about all this. We will have moved on. This will have been resolved. And the security agencies these days, do you understand, they believe in reactive. They are being reactive. They are not proactive. They should be able to think ahead. The Nigerian police, for instance, for me, I think they can do the job. Personally, I think they can do the job.
Really?
I've spoken to some police high-ranked officers.
They have the capacity?
Yeah, they have the capacity.
What entails the capacity to operate as a police officer in Nigeria?
Say that again?
What entails the capacity to operate like a police officer in Nigeria, especially in conflict zones? In conflict zone.
Now, when you join the Nigerian police or any security agencies, you go through your training. I've been there before, you understand? You go through your training. But again, this training is a continuous training because the world changes, situation changes. I mean, over the years, do you understand? In the First World War, the way they fought the First World War is not the way they fought the Second World War. It's not the way they fight in Afghanistan. It's not the way they fought in Iraq. You understand? So things changes. That is what the Nigerian police needs to do. They need to keep training their officers.